People are trickling in this evening. So we'll give them a couple more minutes and then we'll get started. So if you need to get a last minute drink or something, snack, this is a good time to do that. While we're waiting to see if more people join us, does anyone have any stories that you would like to share? Anything you did, especially over the break, that was, I don't know, fun, relaxing, a change of pace? Did anyone do anything special for the actual day of spring that we had on Saturday? Went to a dog park with a friend and got all muddy. Well, both of those things actually sound fun, going to the dog park and getting all muddy. I hope that was fun for you, Emily. Oh, good. Good. Do you have your own dog, or did you just go with a friend's dog, or did you just go to observe the other dogs? Aw, new puppies are fun, but they're a lot of work. Let's see, girls trip to Michigan City Outlets. Nice. I haven't been there in a long time. But that's always a nice outing. Puppies. All right. Okay. So I think we're a small number right now, so I'm hoping that more people will be joining. I know of one person for sure who's not going to make it, and another that I suspect might not be in class tonight, but yeah, we'll see if others join us. So let's see. I lost my train of thought for a second because I was thinking about puppies. Okay, so one thing I do want to say is that I had hoped to have your presentations, your pitch presentations all graded and everything. But my neighborhood was one of the few, but one of the neighborhoods that was hit in the windstorm with a power outage. And so I had planned on doing it all day yesterday and, just having it done for you for today. But instead, I was forced to just sit around on the couch, huddled under a bazillion blankets, reading on my Kindle all day. So I don't have those things done. I swear I wasn't waiting till the last minute, That's just like actually where I planned it in my schedule, but I had to read instead. But I will be working on getting caught up and getting those grades in for you in the next couple of days. And then we can have a more fruitful discussion of what worked well and where, if you were to do that kind of in real life, in your work life or whatever, where you would want to maybe spend some more time and attention on those. But before we go on, does anyone have any specific questions or comments about anything, but especially about the pitch presentations that you did? The awkward silence where we wait to see if anyone posts anything in the chat. I'll keep an eye on it in case anyone thinks of anything. Okay. So I think that was the main thing I wanted to remember to share, was just about the presentations and getting that feedback to you in the next few days. And then tonight we're going to be starting on the next project within our writing in the workplace unit. And this is going to be problems in the workplace. So we're kind of expanding on that whole idea of what we were doing with the pitch projects. But this time we're going to let you work individually, and you will choose a problem in the workplace, and then eventually you're going to create a formal report for that. And I have a question. Did we go over anything new before you got here? Oh yeah, the password reset stuff. That's so annoying. But no, we didn't go over anything new before you got here, Jackson. We were just kind of chatting about puppies and dog parks and spring break, and mud, and the one day of spring that we had on Saturday. So if you have any stories or anything you want to share, feel free to pop those into the chat, or turn on your microphone and talk to us. Yeah, so problems in the workplace is where we are. It's going to be a formal report project. The next unit after this will be moving into the module of writing for digital media. And that will be our final kind of unit for the semester. So it's kind of funny to think that we're halfway through and we've only got these two main units left. And then the very last thing that you'll do is an individual presentation, which will be kind of a portfolio of your technical writing work. And I'll give you more information about that when we get to it. It's not anything that you're going to have to create a bunch of new stuff for unless you want to. Let's see. So you got to watch your uncle's dog for a week. Nice. Did you do anything fun with the dog? Or was it just nice having the dog? Or was it a miserable experience? Which we're going to hope it wasn't. So, I'll get ready to share screen with you. In the meantime, does anyone have any questions or anything? I don't see anything new coming up in the chat, so. Okay. All right, I'm going to stop my video and share my screen. Fun having it interact with your family's dog. That's great. That's nice. Dogs are fun that way. Cats are not like that. Cats are not. And I have a cat, and he's very content to be an only cat. So, all right. So problems in the workplace. A formal report project is where we are. Yeah, obviously I don't have a class recording yet because that's in progress, but after class, I'll get that posted there. So what we're doing tonight, we're going to start with the project introduction, and then we're going to work on defining the problem and developing the question. And the last major portion of class today is going to be about project proposals, and specifically the project proposal for this project. And of course, your assignments are listed at the end. So section 1, problems in the workplace, project introduction. We have a link right there to the project document. The part that we are working on this week is complete, I believe, unless you tell me that there is something that you would like me to have added to this document for part 1. Part 2 and 3, I will be adding more details to those. I just did not get those done before my brain ran out of power this afternoon. So our problems in the workplace project, the purpose of part 1, so it's 3 parts. Again, like we had last time, we had 3 parts. This time we also have 3 parts. We have the topic, question, and proposal, which is part 1. Part 2 is research, and part 3 is writing the report. So part 1 is where we are. Obviously, we should go in order. And that is, as you can see, the proposal is due on Blackboard by noon on Monday. So this week, I do not have a Thursday assignment that's due. Because I want you to spend the time really getting your proposal memo together, and the things that have to be done in order to put that together. So for this assignment, this part of the assignment, you're going to explore various problems in the workplace, develop a couple of research questions, and present one of those with a research plan as your proposal memo. So I do have a list of some here if you need to go back and look at this later, of some workplace problems that real people have mentioned. And then we're just going to look at the memo requirements. So one thing that you should know is for typical memo formatting, if you haven't done a more formal memo before, you want to see page 332 in your handbook of technical writing for that formatting. Obviously, yours is going to be slightly different in content, but the heading of the memo will be, you have to have those parts that are there. And so you can look at that and see, and we'll be looking more detailed as well. So the content, you're going to state your problem, you're going to give an explanation of why this is of interest to you and how you can make it of interest to a general audience. Then you're going to state your research question that you come up with, and you're going to have a research plan. And the things that you need in your research plan are outlined here, which again, we're going to come back to most of this information a little bit later in class. This is just your overview of the project right now. You want to be clear and concise, professional, persuasive, and show your own interest. And then these are the parts that you should have in your memo. And then you can and should use headings where appropriate. Don't just throw them in for the sake of it, but use them where appropriate. Again, you can look at the examples in the handbook. You can also Google do a Google image search of memo examples, and you'll see tons of different examples of memos, and you'll see that they all have basically the same structure to them. And there are also many templates available for Word and for Google Docs. So you can find some of those and probably use one of those if that works for you. And you can also in memos use numbered and or bullet pointed lists as appropriate. And again, you'll see example of that in the book. And so then we'll be working on research, and the main thing that you'll be producing for that is your bibliography, which will be using APA citation style. Next week, we will be going over like what your bibliography should consist of, what APA citation style is, what parts you have to have, all of that stuff. That's next week's. And then after that, we'll be working on writing the formal report. So the class session on the 21st is going to be about the parts of the report, what they look like, what you should have in each one, and all of that. And so I have a question here in the chat that I'm going to read real quick. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So yes, Shelby, of course, that's actually a really good topic. Anxiety in the workplace with returning to the office. Yes. So I think you can come up with some really good stuff for that. And your training, I'm sure will be very helpful and would count as part of your research for this project. The notes that you'd use, any handouts, any resources that are given, any quotes in that we can talk about how you would cite the trainings, however that's set up. So we can talk more about that. But yeah, Shelby, that's good. All right. So let's head back to our presentation. So you know where to find the document. You just come here and click here, and it's also linked another place in the presentation as well. So we're going back here and we're just going to talk about, well, what is this formal report project? And as we just said, first, you're going to define the problem. What is a pressing or interesting workplace problem? Some of you have, full-time or most of the time, 3/4 time, half time, whatever jobs that you are required to be at for most of your life. And I'm sure you have experience there with, common workplace problems. Some of them may be more specific to your own particular workplace. And others might be, you see them in your own workplace, but they are more generalized, like they're experienced by more people. Either could serve as a good topic for this, although the ones that can be generalized are probably going to be more researchable, because then you have to conduct some primary and secondary research. Next week, we'll be looking more specifically at primary and secondary research, but primary research basically is the stuff that you would conduct yourself through surveys, interviews, questionnaires, experiments, if there are any that pertain to what you're doing. And then secondary research is more going and reading the articles that have already been written, what other people have already said about this topic. And then you'll be putting it together in a formal report that explains the research and presents the conclusions. And so you'll be working toward a formal report. Reports in general, and of course, formal reports fall in that category, are organized presentations of factual information. They present results of long-term projects, and they generally follow a precise format. That format can include things such as abstracts, executive summaries. They will have an introduction, a body, and a conclusion. And most formal reports are going to have some sort of recommendations section in it, which often is combined with the conclusion and sometimes is a separate section. And then they're customarily written as correspondence, emails, letters, or memos. The formal report that we're going to be modeling our work after is a pretty lengthy document, and it's not your typical like email where we usually have a fairly short email, and if it is a longer email, it's still easily readable in just a couple of minutes. These reports are actually quite a bit longer. which is why often they come with an abstract or an executive summary, which is where it's kind of broken down, summarized in everyday language for busy people or people who are not experts in that field. So when we get to actually looking at report writing, we'll look more in detail at that. The introduction of a report is going to announce the subject. It's going to state the purpose of that report and present any necessary background information. So it's very similar to any introduction that we would write for any piece of writing. The body is the clearly organized account of the subject. It will include things like results of tests, status of a project, other details, what the research says. All of that kind of information will be in the body of the report. And then the conclusion is going to summarize the findings, interpret the significance, and give recommendations. So there are many different kinds of reports, and we're doing the formal report because it is easily generalized across many different fields, whereas you see about some of these others, feasibility reports, incident reports, investigative reports, laboratory reports, progress and activity reports, test reports, trip reports. Some of those can only be done in certain fields, certain kinds of work. So it would be hard to say everybody has to go write a laboratory report when not all of you are actually doing lab type work. So we're doing the formal report. All right, so before we talk about defining the problem and developing the question, do you have any questions or comments or concerns about the project as you've seen the overview of it, the kind of introduction to it? Okay. All right. We will talk about the problem and the question. And if you do have questions, if they come up in the chat, I will make sure that I address those. So the first thing that you have to do is define the problems. You have to choose a topic and make it specific. For example, you may think, okay, pay inequality, that's a problem in the workplace. And it is. It's an important problem in the workplace. But it's a very large, broad problem. And it's too much for us to work with on its own. So we have to narrow it down. A lot of you probably will remember this from your composition classes, that you can start with this broad idea, but you have to narrow down its scope, its focus, until it's a manageable topic for this particular assignment, for this particular piece of writing that you're doing. So we can narrow it down because I'm in higher education. We can look at pay inequality in higher education, but that still also is a pretty big topic. And it can be narrowed down farther in ways that keep it manageable without being too narrow. So one way we could do that is say pay inequality for females in higher education, or pay inequality for minorities in higher education. Or we could combine those two and pay inequality for minority females in education, higher education, that is. So we could, kind of narrow it down, focus it until we have a manageable problem that we can deal with. And then we're able to start asking questions to help guide the research. But if it's just pay inequality, that's just way too broad to get a good question to work on the research. And you can prove that to yourselves really just by typing into Google pay inequality and then do another search for pay inequality in higher education, compare the results that you get. and then do the same thing for pay inequality for females in higher education and whatnot. And that's, one of the best ways to find out if your topic is too narrow or too broad, or if you don't really know how to narrow your topic, putting it into Google, looking at the results that come up, what catches your eye, what are the themes that are more prominent, and then can you focus your topic in that direction, and until you have one that you feel is interesting and manageable, and then you can start asking your questions. So again, if you need help coming up with a topic, there are several that are listed on the project document. You're free to look through those and see if one of those is of interest to you. And then you would need to, in most cases, start to focus it more so that you can ask good questions for research. I imagine that this information is familiar to most of you, although it may have been a while since you've had to develop a research question for some of you. So we're going to watch this short video on developing a research question. I know that I have a few others that are just as good and maybe help look at it at a different way. So if you are kind of stuck with developing a good research question and you need more resources, let me know and I can dig those up and share them with you.
So, you have to write a research paper. For some of you, this might mean going to Google, typing in your general topic, and using information from the first 2 or 3 results that you find. For others, this might mean trying to find out everything you possibly can about your topic. Unfortunately, neither of these approaches is likely to get great results. To be done right, research needs to be guided by a focused research question. Without a good research question, you will probably end up with a paper that never really comes together because you didn't have a clear direction. But what exactly is a research question? At the most basic, the research question is just a question related to your topic that needs to be answered. The whole purpose of your research will be to provide an answer to the question. You're probably thinking that this doesn't sound too difficult. If a research question is just a question about your topic, it should be easy to come up with one, right? Well, not exactly. For many students, developing a research question is actually one of the hardest parts of the whole research process. In some cases, a student might not know enough about their topic to even understand the kinds of questions that are possible to ask. Even if the student has some knowledge about the topic, they may still not have a good idea of the whole scope of the topic or of recent developments related to that topic. For this reason, it's usually a good idea to try to do some background research before you try to settle on a specific question. This doesn't have to be extensive or time-consuming. For many of you, simply looking at a Wikipedia article or a few recent news articles related to your topic will be enough to give you some ideas for directions that you want to explore. Once you have a bit of background information, you'll be better able to focus your topic into a good research question. But what makes a question a good research question? There are several things that you need to keep in mind. First, a research question should not be too narrow or too broad. If you could answer your question with a few facts, you're not researching, you're just searching. On the other hand, if you would need to write an entire book to appropriately answer your question, then it's probably not a good question for you either, at least at this level. Your question also needs to be specific. Questions such as, is television a bad influence? Is very vague. Which television programs are you talking about? What audience are you talking about? What exactly do you mean by bad? Making your question a bit more precise will give you more direction for your research. Research questions should also have some significance. It should be something that interests you because you will be spending some time with the topic, but it should also be something that other people might find important as well. This doesn't mean that you can't research topics like popular culture or sports or social media. It just means that you need to frame your research in such a way as to make sure the topic is relevant to more than just you. While you want your topic to be significant, you also want to be careful not to ask the types of questions that can't really be answered. Questions such as, why must people suffer, or what happens after we die, are certainly significant to many people, but very difficult to answer. Keep in mind that research papers are not intended to be philosophical treatises. So, as you can see, asking any old question related to your topic won't work. Fortunately, many poor research questions can be transformed into good research questions with only a few tweaks. For example, the question of why must people suffer could be transformed into a more focused question, such as how have major 20th century Christian theologians explained the purpose of human suffering? Finally, you might also want to make your research question a little bit unique or creative. Some topics have already been researched over and over and over, and you might want to avoid those topics if you can. If you do have a common topic, it's often a good idea to try to find a slightly different angle, something that allows you to add your own twist. After all, research should not be about asking questions that have already been answered many times before.
Created using Powtoon.
Okay. All right, so before we move forward, does anyone have questions about developing a research question or making a good research question? All right, so we're going to do some work here. And you're going to start by listing 3 to 5 topics of interest. You can list more than that if you would like to. And again, you can look at the list that is on the project document to get some ideas. Maybe you'll choose some of those. Maybe you'll look at one and say, well, I have a different version of that one, and you can write that down. So, here are some examples though: leaders without proper training, lack of effective communication, mental health concerns, employee burnout. So I have 4 of them right there. And then for each topic, you want to develop a question. So this right now, we're just playing around with developing the questions from the topics. And then you're not committed to any one of them right now, but you will eventually need to commit to one. Maybe not one of the ones that you do right now. Maybe after you go out of class and you think about it for a while, you'll have a different idea that you want to do. And if you want to run any of those ideas by me, either during class tonight or after class, sometime during the week, you can email me and I can, talk to you about it either through email, or if you want to do a quick Google Meet or Zoom or something, we can do that as well. So if I were choosing the last topic, employee burnout, one of the questions I could ask is, what are the relationships among job resources, job demands, and burnout? Like, how do those 3 things work together or conflict with one another that affects employee burnout, whether it's creating more or preventing? So at this point, I don't really know, but I want to explore that. I want to find out, what are those relationships? And then if I were choosing the lack of effective communication, one question that I might ask is, how do various employee groups perceive effective communication? And by employee groups, I could be thinking men versus women, white people versus minorities. I could be thinking about management versus the general worker, the general employee. Like different groups. I could be thinking about, how do those different groups perceive effective communication? And then from there, I can start talking or exploring things like where communication breaks down and how to overcome those breakdowns, how to create effective channels of communication for everyone. And that would be a direction I could take with that one. And then, of course, you can think of similar types of questions for leaders without proper training and mental health concerns. And so for each of your 3 to 5 topics, you want to develop at least one question. And so I'm going to give you all about 10 minutes right now to work on that on your own. And then when we come back, I'm going to ask some of you to share a topic and a question, so that we can kind of get an idea of where people are, what you're thinking, and somebody, of course, might want to borrow a topic in question from someone else if they like what they see better than they have on their own. All right, so I am going to set my timer for 10 minutes and give you time to work on that. Are there any questions before I start the timer? Okay, 10 minutes. All right. It has been 10 minutes, and so if you can wrap up whatever you're writing at the moment, that would be great. And then I would love for some volunteers to share your topics and questions with us. And if we don't get volunteers, I can set up a Jamboard really quickly and you can all just post them and nobody has to know whose is whose. But we'll start asking for volunteers. Let's see if we get anyone.
I can go first.
Awesome.
So my first topic is employee burnout. And my question is still kind of broad. I said, what are the causes of employee burnout in a corporate setting?
Okay.
But then I thought, is there a relationship between employee burnout and lack of employee retention? So I did not develop a question for that one yet. But then my second one is lack of effective training. And my question was, how has lack of effective training impacted quality issues in automotive vehicles?
Oh, interesting.
And that's about as far as I got.
Okay. Those are good. And I like that you were thinking about with your first one and thinking about how the second sort of direction you were going with it is still a little broad, but you know you could do something in that direction. So that's, I mean, obviously in 10 minutes, most people are not going to have a perfectly well thought out topic and research question and be ready to just dive into the research. So where you are now is good. It shows that you've got some ideas and they're really good ideas. So there's stuff to work with.
Yeah, thank you.
You.
I can go.
Okay, great.
So mine's more like architectural based. And so my first one was on like construction sites, like the amount of waste that happens. So I said, how big of an impact can you make lessening the waste on a construction site? I'm not sure if I can do anything, but I'll just keep going with my ideas. How, so right now, like the lack of availability for materials is a thing, and inflated like material costs. So how to deal with the lack of the materials, or how to deal with inflated material costs. How to be flexible on a job site when timing doesn't go as planned. And then another issue is like oversized houses in the USA, is bigger always better. So those were all my ideas so far.
Those are really good, interesting ideas. I like the last one, especially considering there's this lumber shortage.
Yeah. Yep. And just really big houses everywhere. And do we actually need that much space? So
yeah, good. There's a lot of directions that research could take you, especially with that question. All of them were good, but that's just one that I know you can go lots of different directions.
Yeah, because like sustainable, building design is like more efficient building, so I could, go into sustainable design too. So
yes. Yeah, great. Thank you for sharing.
Yep.
Okay, we have one in the chat here. Should we provide private spaces for women and men in non-traditional workplaces, separate sleeping and bathroom spaces, consequences for others using those spaces? So are you primarily focusing on like, I guess?
So I guess the thought process is my specific example is like the fire department, but it's not unreasonable to have those other jobs where
Like
what
healthcare.
if somebody's on an oil rig or
Yeah.
military spaces, stuff like that. I just know that that's something that I had talked about with other people, that was something that came up.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's definitely a relevant set of questions there for certain types of work that people do. And that I think would be especially that consequences part of it for others using those spaces. Because you can go again, like actual, I guess tangible consequences, but then there would also be maybe some psychological consequences, and kind of getting into some of that would be interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, thank you. Thanks, Beth, for sharing that. Anyone else willing to share with us your topic and questions? Shelby.
Yeah, let me pull it back up. So obviously the employee anxiety within the workplace.
Mhm.
I did like, how can we address and help ease that, and what is causing it, and just kind of generally looking at improving the workspace. Then I also addressing issues with unknown bias or discrimination, or at-home management with hybrid schedules, and kind of how we can do that in a more beneficial way to make it comfortable for both employers and employees.
Okay. And those are definitely relevant issues right now. We're seeing a lot of discussion about that taking place, and it's definitely a timely, relevant discussion. So I think you've got some great places you can go with these topics, and the training that you're going to do, I think, will be really helpful with that. Okay. Anyone else? Don't be shy.
I have one that kind of connects back with employee burnout.
Okay.
So at work, we just went through a organizational restructure. And
Mhm.
so we've got a lot of employees that are, disengaged. And so my question was, how does a restructure impact employee morale?
Aha. Yes, that's good. That's a good one. Again, yes. And that disengagement is such a big, it's a big deal, I guess you could say, in workplace culture.
Mhm.
Yeah, we're having, GRCC is in the midst of restructuring the administration. And so we're having discussions similar to that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it seemed like it was almost, I think it was 8 months from the beginning to the end, and now everybody's in new assignments, and we were told we were gonna do less work, because we had less people, and it's just, people are getting burned out, so.
Yeah. Well, and you have to look at, I mean, there are different factors with that too. Like how much of that is due to just having to relearn the workflow, the processes, the structure, all of that, like, however that works in your place. But also, how much of that is maybe due to resistance to change?
Mhm.
Even those humans who really enjoy change often have elements of resistance that they may not even be aware of. And then something like this comes up, and you have to wonder, is there a bit of resistance that's at play, as well as, was this maybe not the best way of restructuring things?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And I think it definitely goes back, could even touch on that lack of effective communication, because everybody's in new roles, and a lot of the knowledge left. So everyone's kind of starting from scratch. So,
And that takes a lot of energy.
yeah,
And it's not always the most positive energy that's put out, right?
that's a fact.
All right. Well, if you decide to pursue this general topic, and it'll be interesting to see which direction you go with it, but I think there's a lot there that can be worked with.
For sure. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Right. Does anyone have a topic in question that they're not so sure about, that you put it together, but you're really not sure that it's a good topic, good question, and you're willing to share that with us, and we can talk about, what works with it and what maybe needs some more work? Mm. A lot of you are in your quiet moods again, huh? That's okay. The floor is always open for anyone who wants to jump in and share something or ask something. So it's a judgment-free zone as far as that goes. So let's go forward here. So many of you who shared, you were sharing, a lot from your own experiences in the workplace, it sounds like, and maybe it was easy for you to identify topics of interest and start exploring the questions that would be good for research. Some of you, though, might be a little stuck, and you might be wondering, well, I don't really know. I don't, maybe I don't have the work experience. Maybe I just don't, I'm oblivious to it. Maybe I just don't really have good ideas right now because it's the end of the day and I've had a long day and I just don't really know. One way to start working with your topic and to try to help develop a question is actually doing a little bit of preliminary research. So I ask on here for you to use the GRCC databases, mostly because I know that you can get good articles that way. But if you really want to do just a general Google search right now, that will suffice. Next week, I will be giving you more specific instruction on using the databases and the GRCC one search and all of that. So if you're not really up to that right now, you can just do a general like Google and see what, or use Google Scholar and see what you can come up with. But what I want you to do is to choose one of your topics. And then I want you to search that topic, looking for 3 articles about it, somehow related to your topic. When you're doing research on this, they don't have to be exact for what you're looking at, because if it's related to your topic, it can give you some insight that you may not have thought of if you just stick to a very narrow, well, I'm writing about X, so every source has to be exactly about X. It needs to be, you could say adjacent to X. It needs to be close to X and have something to do with it, but not necessarily directly about it is okay. But you want to read 3 articles, or if they're long scholarly type articles, just read the abstract of them. The abstracts shouldn't be more than 200 to 250 words, so that won't take very long to read. And then you want to make a note of any key points for each of those articles, and then use your notes to develop 2 research questions. So those of you who already have a good idea, such as those who have shared, you can start doing a little bit of reading, and maybe it will give you more direction or more refinement of those questions. And then those who are still maybe kind of wondering what are we doing, then you can have another way of approaching this process of developing research questions by doing a little bit of preliminary research and then figuring out your question. So for this one, I'm going to give you 20 minutes. So we're not doing in-depth readings of anything right now. You're just looking for 3 articles that seem like they have something to offer. And you're reading in order to find what they have to offer, making a few notes and developing some research questions. So I'm giving you 20 minutes to work on this. And at the end of those 20 minutes, I will ask more people to share. Ideally, those would be people who haven't shared already. Although if you have already shared and you have a new insight, or you want to share how this preliminary research kind of helped you refine or rethink about your topic and your question, that would be great. So any questions before I start the timer again? You all understand what I'm asking you to do? All right, then I will start the timer. And if you do have any questions, just let me know. All right, do we have any volunteers to share what you have now for your questions, your topic and questions? Or would it work better if I set up a Jamboard and everyone just adds yours to it? And then you don't have to worry about whose is whose.
I can go kind of branching off of the relationship between lack of employee retention and burnout. I found that a lot of it has to do with stress and also like what an employee needs for like a stable work environment to have them to stay. So my questions are just how can we reduce stressors in the workplace? And then what does an employee need to feel there in a stable work environment so they feel fulfilled? Because that was in one article I read about, was talking about how an employee needs to be fulfilled by the position they're in.
Okay, good. And I'm sure as if you were to do more reading, you might refine your questions even more. But yeah, that's a good kind of a good take on where you from where you started with the topic and to where it's kind of leading you now. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Need more volunteers.
Oh yeah, I can do mine. So I was kind of researching how the pandemic affected one's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, doing some research. I found that depression increased by 28% during the pandemic and anxiety increased by 26%. And that some of the stressors per se were like a low household income or not being married. And that led to an increase in that, amongst other things.
Okay. So what like what question would you ask then for continuing research?
I'm still working on that. Like right now, I'm just thinking how the pandemic affected one's mental health, and then maybe how one can cope with their mental health, and still needs a little more research.
Yeah. Yeah, again, it's a big big topic. So then trying to find the right focus for it. But yes, that might require doing some more research to figure out how to focus that. But thank you for sharing, Ethan, where you are in that process, because it's important that we can see that it's, sometimes 20 minutes isn't enough to come up with exactly what you want to try to research. Okay. Other volunteers, we need a few more to share where you are in this process. And like Ethan, if you're not, fully on the question train yet, you're still in the trying to figure it out train, that's fine. You can share that with us. It can be helpful for everyone.
I'll share my process with this so far.
Great.
So I started off kind of curious about how complacency in the workplace affected mental health. And then as I started researching it, I kind of realized there was a lot of things that can affect mental health in the workplace. So I kind of changed my question to how does a poor work environment affect mental health? And I think some kind of like further questions I'll ask myself down the road would be, why is this important? Not everyone has to deal with mental health. Not everyone sees that. So, how do I grab, the full attention of the audience? And then also, what causes a poor workplace? What are the things that happen to make that a bad environment? So,
Okay. Yeah, I think those are some good questions that can help you dig into that relationship between poor work environment and mental health. Definitely, and it sounds like you're kind of going that way. You'll want to figure out, well, what exactly is a poor work environment? And so you might need to narrow that down to a particular industry, particular type of work too.
Sure.
But yeah, it sounds like you've got some room to work here. And so if that's what you were if you decide that's what you want to pursue, I think that would be a good topic, a good direction to go.
I can go. So this is just based on the is bigger always better, and then our house is too big in the USA or something like that.
Yeah.
So now I'm gonna flip it and I'm gonna say, why is the tiny house market growing in the US?
And that could get at some of that that other question about bigger, is bigger always better?
Yeah.
By looking at the opposite of that, the tiny house market, and the fact that there's a lot of movement in that direction. Yeah, that could be really interesting. And I think both questions could really get you at
Okay.
the same.
Because I
Were you gonna share something else?
Oh no, I'm sorry. It might have just been my internet stopped working for a second, but nope, that was all I had.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Sharon. That was good. I like that you flipped it around.
Thanks.
Anyone else willing to share? Thank you for the new ones who are sharing your voices and your ideas with us. In addition to those who are helping us see how they've refined and revised and maybe even turned a different direction with theirs. But we'd love to hear a couple more voices if we can get them.
I can go.
All right, thanks, Landon.
So I think my point I'm focusing on right now is employee turnover issues and why there's a lot of people quitting their job and finding something new over especially the past 2 years. Some of the questions like what policies are need to be put in place in the workplace to lower the rate and if there are specific fields of work that are seeing worse employee turnover rates than others. So the articles, I found some articles that kind of help with my last question about the field of work.
Mhm.
There was one that was talking about the hotel industry, how bad their turnover rate is, especially since the pandemic, and
Yeah.
how it's affecting them. And then I found another article about about hospital employees, and their turnover rate is pretty bad right now, and how it's affecting them. And then I found others that I haven't really got into yet, but I found like 3 others
Mhm.
that talk about just the turnover rate in general over the past couple of years.
Great. Yeah, that's an interesting topic. And there's again, like there is a lot of talk about that, especially people quitting their jobs, and then those who are not even looking for new jobs, but they're doing other things. So a lot of the reasoning behind where all the workers going, and what contributed to that, what led up to it, and how did the pandemic sort of facilitate that exodus from the workforce. Yeah, it's a timely topic, and there's a lot that you can research with that. So I think that as long as you're careful about the sources that you choose, you'll have a lot you can do with that. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else? One more. We just want one more. I mean, we'd love everyone, but if we could get one more, that would be great.
I guess I could throw mine out there.
All right, thanks.
I'm not quite confident in it fully yet, but the topic I was thinking of going with is how does micromanaging ruin a team's chemistry?
Yeah.
And then I kind of developed 3 like sub questions from the articles that I kind of pulled up. The first question I kind of developed was, does micromanaging lead to conflict in the workplace? Second
Okay.
one I got is, what are the negative effects of micromanaging? And
Mhm.
then the third one I got is, how is micromanaging devastating in the long term?
Okay. Those are good. The first one is probably not going to take you super far because it's more of a like, what was your first one again?
Does micromanaging lead to conflict in the workplace?
Yeah, that's what I thought. So that one, it's going to have more of a yes or no type of answer, even though it's going to be a nuanced yes or no.
Mhm.
But it can get you started.
Mhm.
And then the other ones, they're a little bit more open, and you'll start to get a little more solid information from those that you can build on. I would caution you about using some of the qualitative words, like the negative in that, and stick more with the, like, how does micromanaging affect team
Gotcha.
camaraderie or team productivity and stuff like that.
Mhm.
I think you will find, if you pursue this line of inquiry, I think that you will find more sources that way.
Mhm.
And most likely they are going to have that negativity behind them, because how many people really like to be micromanaged on a daily basis in the workplace?
Yeah, that's a good point. I was surprised to see like positive effects of micromanaging as like some of the articles when they popped up.
Yeah, which I guess there probably are some.
Yeah, I'm
But
sure in some workforces probably.
yeah, so I think if you just, when you do searches, if you kind of leave out those qualitative or rephrase it so that it's more open, you'll see, like, because looking at some of the articles that talk about positive effects of micromanaging could give you some insight that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Interesting. Yeah,
So
I'll give that a thought. I'll give that a try. But
yeah,
I'm not fully confident in this topic yet.
yeah,
I
that's okay. I mean,
direction to quite go with it.
yeah, I've given you so little time this evening, but it was really more of the practicing the process and exploring some ideas, and you're not locked into it tonight. So
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah, hearing everybody else's thoughts also is helpful. So
Yeah, see, that's why I like you guys to share, because it does help. Even if someone doesn't have a fully formed idea or question yet, if they have sort of some thoughts in mind, then we can all benefit from hearing that from each other. So thank you again to everyone who's been sharing. And I do understand, that there are reasons why other people don't share. I do encourage you to share if you're willing. And remember, you can always share in the chat if you're not so confident or comfortable speaking up. It's okay to just share it in the chat. But if there's anyone else who would like to share, the floor is still open. If not, we'll move on to the next part of our lesson for tonight, our work for tonight. Do you have anyone else who is interested in sharing? Okay. So when you do go and work more with your research questions, you want to remember that whatever questions you come up with, you want them to be focused. So we already saw some of you talking through the idea of, well, I know this is a really general question and I think I could go this way. So, you want it to be focused, because that will help with not being overwhelmed by the sources that you come up with. You want it to be somewhat unique in that you don't want it to be the same question that everyone else is asking. You want to have kind of your own spin on it if you can. You want it to be somewhat creative. Again, a new twist on a question rather than just asking the same old that other people have asked. You want to work to make your questions precise, and you want them to have some significance for you first, but it also should be something that is significant to a wider audience, or you should be able to show that significance to a wider audience. And then you want to make sure that whatever you have is researchable, but is not over researched. So if something is over researched, it means that they have already answered your question. Your question has answers out there, and there's really not much new to say about it. If it's not researchable at all, that just means that nobody has been doing any studies and writing on it or producing videos on that topic and that question. And so you really wouldn't have any sources available to you. So if you are trying to Google something and you're getting absolutely no results at all, or what you are getting are pretty sketchy, you want to revise your question, or maybe shift your topic altogether. Okay, any questions about that? So our last section for tonight is, or our last main section for tonight is the project proposal. And this links back to the project document that we were looking at earlier. So we're not going to open that right now. You can go back and look at that on your own. Although if you do have specific questions about it, obviously we'll look at it and answer those questions. But for your project proposal, this is where you are going to propose to me your research, what you want to do for your research. And you're going to use an internal memo format. So internal, because we're all part of the same class. And then we're using a memo format because that is a common format that would be used within a department or a class or a unit, a team. So pages 412 and 413 in your handbook give you an example of a memo so that you can see what that looks like. that memo's purpose is different than yours, so you will have different content, obviously, but the formatting will be much the same. What you are going to do is you're going to include your statement of problem. So whatever the problem is, that topic that you've chosen, you're going to state what that is and why it's of personal interest to you. You're going to share your research question or questions, because some of you are finding that one question is really tied up with a couple of other questions. And so you kind of treat them all as a group. And then you're going to include a research plan, and that research plan is going to have specific primary and secondary research goals. All of that is listed in the project document with, how it's supposed to be presented, what exactly is involved, say, in the research plan. So that is all something that, when you study that document, you'll see exactly what it is you have to have in your memo or in your proposal memo. So let me see here. Yeah. So do you have any questions about that? Do you want to go back and take a look at it? Would you like to go back and take a look at the document together again? Yes, I have one yes, so I'm gonna go back for the one yes, because we don't want to leave anyone behind, and we just need to go back to it. Okay. Okay, so your proposal memo again is due on Monday, next week, Monday. So we don't have a midweek submission this week. Although if you want to run anything by me in the middle of the week, you've got a new idea for topic and questions, you want to see if you're on the right track, please let me know, because I'll be glad to talk about that with you. Your purpose of your proposal is to persuade, you can think of like a supervisor or manager, that would be me in this case, to allow you to pursue a particular project relating to a specific problem in the workplace. Right? Your audience is me. So you need to think about, how you should write for me, for my expectations, which I'm laying out here for you. So it's probably the easiest audience to write for. And the genre that you're writing in is the internal proposal memo. So again, I believe that's 412 and 413 in your handbook. So you can look there for an example. So for this assignment, you're exploring various problems in the workplace and developing research questions, and then you're going to present those in your proposal memo. And if you need to review these, those were some of the topics that you could use if you wanted to, or versions of the topics that you could use. And then page 332 has specific typical memo formatting. So that's another place you can look for how is a memo typically formatted. Again, the purpose of that memo is different than what you're doing. So you'd really just want to look at like, how are things set up on the page? What's the layout? What are the headings that are used? How are they used? That kind of thing. Your content will include a statement of the problem, the explanation of your personal interest in the problem and how you can make it of interest to a general audience, the statement of your research question or questions. In fact, I'll just add that there. And then your research plan. So within your research plan, I want to see at least 3 sources that you're already looking at. So those could be the ones you looked at tonight, or if you change topics, 3 more. that you look at. So I want to see that you've done a little bit of preliminary research, and you know that this is a researchable topic, researchable question. You haven't figured it all out yet, but you've started. Okay, so those are secondary sources. Anytime you're looking at what other people have said or written or done, those are secondary sources. So then I want you to give the citation information for that, for those three sources. And then I would like you to list any other kinds of secondary sources you think you should look for, whether those be articles, in more like media type articles, like news articles and that, or whether you should be looking at scholarly articles in journals or trade journals, academic journals, that kind of thing. Whether maybe you know of a particular video or video series or something that is well done, that you could use, and you can put that down as a secondary source. And then what primary sources do you think you will use? Do you think you'll create a survey to give to your workmates? Do you think that you will send out some sort of a questionnaire that you can ask all the people, in your social media contacts to fill out a questionnaire or survey? Would you do an interview with someone, maybe with a colleague or with a supervisor or something? What would you do for primary sources? And then you want to have a timeline for completing your research, and the formal report is due Thursday, the 31st of March. So that can help you know like where your timeline is. And then I did put down here the like what's due when, and this is actually the bibliography that's due. So the bibliography is due on the 21st. You have an outline due on the 24th, your draft on the 28th, and your revised report due on the 31st. So that gives you, things to work with for creating a timeline of when you want to get things done. And I know every single one of us in this class, we're all busy. So we have to make sure that we get these things sort of planned, scheduled out, to make sure that you can fit it all in wherever you need to. For style, the style of the memo is clear and concise. We're not wasting words. We're not writing, really long, complicated sentences, showing off big vocabulary. You're actually clear and concise. You want to use be professional in your word choice and your sentence structure. You want to be persuasive. You want your reader, to feel that you are actually genuinely interested in this topic. And I forgot to put this earlier, but you want to avoid jargon as much as possible. Because I am not an expert on any of your topics, most likely. So you want to make sure that it's accessible to me as a non-expert reader. Right. Your design, you'll have a header, and it will say memorandum in the center somewhere. And then you're going to have a line to the left, the to, from, date, and subject, like one right after each other. You'll see that on the examples in the handbook. And then again, you can Google easily memo examples, and tons of them will come up. And you'll see that all of them are very similar in this format. It's a pretty standard format. And then you'll have your message, which will include an introduction where you state the problem and the personal interest in the problem and how you can make it interesting to others. The body will have the background information, the research question, and your research plan with your timeline. And then you'll have just a very brief conclusion that summarizes, I'm planning to research this, and I'm going to be doing these things, and then any questions or concerns that you have. And you can use headings where it's appropriate. Those headings shouldn't be introduction, body, conclusion, but you'll see in the examples the use of headings. So, it might be that you have research plan, timeline as your headings and things like that. And then you can use numbered and bullet pointed lists wherever those are appropriate, if they're appropriate for your particular memo. So that is what is expected in your memos. Does anyone have any questions about that and concerns? Is there a word limit? For this one, I am not going to give you a word limit. In general, most memos in an office setting shouldn't be more than a page. If they go on to a second page, they definitely shouldn't take the whole second page. But since we're doing something a little, I don't know, a little different than a typical office memo, we're doing a particular, a proposal memo, it can be a little bit longer than that. Like it can be 2 pages if it needs to be 2 pages. But again, you want to make sure that you are being concise and clear in your writing. Any other questions that you have? Okay. All right. So the last thing that we have to talk about then are the assignments. So you do have your research proposal, which we have just been talking about. That is due Monday by noon. If you don't get it in early enough in the afternoon, I will not have enough time to review it before class and approve your plan. So do your very, very best to get that in by noon on Monday. That will help all of us. And then you do have some readings. The first one is about formal reports. It's really good information about formal reports with an example of a really strong and lengthy formal report. But that example is annotated, which means it tells you exactly what's happening in each section. So it gives you the different parts of the report are all explained. And then the example, there is a memo which kind of provides the sort of introduction to the report, telling you what it is and what it's about, the brief summary of it. And then it goes on and there's an abstract, and there as the table of contents, there's executive summary, there's everything in it. And everything is annotated for you. So you can spend some time reading through that, studying the annotations, looking at what is all involved in this report writing. We are going to go over that in 2 weeks when you actually come to write your report. But if you can read it now, you will have kind of that setting, that context you need for the research that you're doing. I would also like you to read the brief section on research as a refresher. It may have been a while since you've done some research for some of you. So it's a good thing to do a little bit of refreshing your mind on those. So you really do have a couple of weeks to get through the formal report part. The research you should have read before class next week. Are there any questions about anything, or anyone want to share stories about anything? Okay. Well, if we don't have any other questions or comments or anything, here's my little bit of inspiration for you today, because it's always good to have these little quotes to remind us of things. And then I will go ahead and let you take off. Yeah, it's rather early. I don't like to let you go that early, but I'm not going to make you stay and stare at a screen for no good reason either. If you do have questions and you didn't want to ask them, during class, and you want to stick around afterwards, that's fine. We can talk about things. And for those of you who came in late after I had announced it, my neighborhood was one that actually did lose power for the whole day yesterday, actually in the middle of the night through early evening. So I did not get the grading of the pitch presentations done, which I had set aside my time yesterday to do. But I couldn't do it because I didn't have electricity or internet or anything. So I will be working on that in the next couple of days, trying to get those done as soon as I possibly can. Since I don't have that huge block of time like I did yesterday, it'll take a little bit longer to get them done, but I will get those done soon, and you should see that feedback, and then we can have more discussion about it next week. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to do that. All right. Unless you have questions, comments, or concerns, or a story to tell, you are free to go about your evening.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you. Have a
Take
good night.
care.